Good morning and greetings to everyone, particularly Christian lawyers to whom this message is addressed in particular. Not that other lawyers, Christians, lawyers who are not Christians should not see this, but I have Christians who practice secular law, particularly in mind, in shaping and sharing these thoughts. The central question I want to raise with them is this. While you practice law, do you pay any heed to the meaning of law and what impact it should ideally have on society? What does it mean to practice law? That's the central question. I say this because of my experiences with workers in diverse professional fields, including education. Most people, for some interesting reason, do not reflect or think about the meaning of what they are doing. I have done orientation programs for teachers practically in all states and union territories of India, barring Jammu and Kashmir. And this is a question I've raised with them. Do you understand what it means to educate? And most teachers just have a blank look. While we are doing something, somehow it doesn't occur to us to seek, understand the meaning of what we are doing. Therefore, what happens? Every work or every domain of service has two parts. One is the mechanism of it, and the other is the meaning of it. People get bogged down to the mechanism of it, forget the meaning of it, and to be driven entirely by the mechanism of something is to be burdened with what otherwise should have been a stimulating and empowering experience. So there is a real problem here, and the purpose of this video is merely to alert you to this problem and not to give a comprehensive presentation, which would take far too long in time. So let me say a few words more on the subject. Now, to understand this, perhaps I should bring in the analogy of religion. How do Christians use the Bible? Do Christians really use the Bible as the living Word of God, though that expression remains, or do they use it as a tool or as a statute book containing certain divine prescriptions, do's and don'ts? How do Christians use the Bible? It's the same way that citizens use the Constitution, and perhaps how lawyers practice law is not different from this. My very clear and ardent conviction is that each profession is meant and mandated to be a beneficial influence on the society. If workers in every field are involved, whether they know it or not, are involved in nation building. And beyond that, and this is something never talked about, but Swami Vivekananda was always conscious of this, beyond the idea of nation building, there is also the idea of man-making. In fact, Swami Vivekananda said that the supreme goal of education must be man-making. By that phrase, he meant actually the idea of enriching humanity, humankind as a whole, by equipping individuals to be the best examples or best exemplars of what humanity should mean. And I believe that in that sense, Swami Vivekananda's idea of education was not far from or different from the idea of education that the French thinker Rousseau had, who in his book titled Emile, E-M-I-L-E, said that the goal of education must be the perfection of human nature. In other words, producing better and better human beings, or enabling people to reveal something better about the species to which they belong. And I find the same vision, for example, in Sri Narayana Guru in Kerala, who did his great reform work several decades ago, who said that what we need is not temples of worship but temples of learning. And his idea of learning was that it should result in the refinement and ennoblement of human nature. So you see a certain kinship. I've just picked up a few thinkers from here and there at random, just to highlight the point that those who think and are inspired in their thinking and have the good of humankind in their mind as the goal to be pursued, they all come to this conclusion that no matter which area of service you are called to serve, you have to ultimately work towards the betterment of humanity. Now, that's the ultimate. The proximate task, that is the task before that, or the task preparatory to the ultimate task, is building a healthy society and nurturing healthy human beings. So, how do we help individuals to be human? That's the issue. Now, law has a very important role to play in this process. Most lawyers think that their work can be limited to the gymnastics, the verbal gymnastics, and the subtle code craft they practice in courts of law. Well, they do a fantastic job of it. I'm fascinated by the outstanding lawyers in this country and the tremendous intellectual acumen, sharpness of mind, and above all, the prodigious memory that these people have. It's something that makes me feel really astonished. But I find that on the whole, lawyers with this larger sense of practicing their vocation, something that I found in Nani Palkhiwala, a great Parsi lawyer. In fact, he was a leading lawyer in his times. He was a constitutional lawyer, and I had the occasion to listen to him as well as read his book, his memoir. So we had a few examples of that kind. To some extent, I find Falias Nariman. Falias Nariman argued the St. Stephen's case in 1991. So I had the opportunity to work with him because I was assigned the duty of providing the data pertaining to admissions. So I cherish that moment. But by and large, I find the vast majority of lawyers in this country have a very narrow vision as to the scope of practicing law. Now, I believe that law is a very powerful instrument for not only reforming societies but also for transforming societies. And that is something that most lawyers would be astonished when they hear me say this. Because unfortunately, the scope of law is limited to either inhibiting or punishing excesses. It's when an infringement happens that law wakes up and the offender is hauled up before a court of law and he is duly punished. But, like in medicine, where you have two completely different streams of medical sciences. One is the curative medicine and the other is the preventive medicine or prophylactic medicine. Now it's called public health or community health or what have you. But the difference is this: while curative medicine perfects its technique, its knowledge, in order to intervene in episodes of illness, preventive or prophylactic medicine tries to avert the outbreak or the incidence of diseases. And I believe that my heart is with the second approach. So I believe the same thing applies to the practice of law. It also applies to the practice of my profession, which is teaching. And it should apply certainly to the practice of the divine calling, priesthood, if you like. So where this larger dimension is missing, the practitioners of a profession become mercenary. Their understanding suffers in the process, their personality diminishes, and rather than contribute to the enrichment of the human species through the brilliant and inspired practice of their very amazing lore, the legal lore, the legal knowledge, skills, practice, codecraft, etc., they actually aggravate, or they themselves become part of the disease which they are meant to solve. Now, what do I mean by, let me make this a little more clear so that my meaning is understood. What do I mean by saying that law can play a far more proactive role in creating a sane and healthy society? Now, again, let me very briefly recall the analogy of Christians and their Bible. Christians can actually relate to the Bible as the living Word of God, in which case they will use the Bible, especially the teachings of Jesus Christ, as the light by which to shape their personal life and to guide their public involvement. So in that case, the word otherwise which is printed on paper becomes a living reality through the power it reveals, through the attempts on the part of believers to put it to practice, the various insights, spiritual insights to practice, resulting in the revelation of their relevance, their fruitfulness, and their power. It's only when a spiritual insight is put to practice and its impact felt by others that it begins to be alive. Otherwise, it is just a few words printed in a statute book. Historically, Christians were known as, and today, of course, nobody talks about it, Christians were called people of the book. I doubt if anyone today would call Christians people of the book. That particular description meant that the early Christians especially in the first 3 centuries, tried to fashion their individual and community life according to the teachings of Jesus Christ as well as the teachings of the 12 apostles. By 12 apostles, I mean including Paul, because after Judas is excluded from the original 12, and the 12th position was given to somebody else. But then in terms of the idea of apostleship, we include Paul in the list. So the early Christians took these teachings seriously and tried to bridge the gulf between theory and practice. And this is something that Jesus was particularly concerned about, as you recall, that towards the end of the Sermon on the Mount, that is Matthew 5, 6, 7, Jesus concludes this very wonderful body of teaching with a parable that emphasizes the importance of integrating knowledge and action. What you hear from me, what you understand in terms of spiritual insights, mean nothing to you or will mean nothing to you unless you put it to practice. And therefore he said that he who hears these words of mine and does them is like a wise man who built his house upon the rock. The rains came down, the wind blew upon it, beat upon it, but it stood because it was well founded. It was founded on the rock of faith. So that strength is what is missing from the life of Christians, and that strength is also missing, I'm afraid, in the various professions, and therefore the idea of profession itself has undergone a decay or a diminution in its scope and meaning. And let me explain that. On that I'll close. Most people today equate profession with career. And I have found this confusion in practically every field of work. When people use the word profession, they actually mean career. Whereas these two are completely different and they need to be understood as different terms. And what is the difference? Career is individualistic. In career, an individual pursues what's good for himself or herself and seeks to maximize one's gains through promotion or whatever. That's career. So career implies personal ambition for oneself, driven by motives of enlarging one's profit, one's gain. Career really does not have a reference to the larger good of the institution one serves or the society to which one belongs. Not so the idea of the profession. In profession, it's not enough that a person works with great distinction and devotion within an institution, being limited within its framework. A true professional is one who does all that. He discharges his official or designated duties to the best of his ability, maintains a healthy work culture, but beyond all of that, he also has one of his eyes permanently glued to the condition of the society and seeks to understand how best to contribute to the richness and building of the society. That's when you become a professional. A careerist does not have to have the second reference. A careerist can really live within himself or herself. A true professional has a continuous reference to what is good for the society. But this idea of professionalism or true professionalism is now extinct. And I challenge you to find out, just sample the opinion of a few professionals from various professions, whether it be medicine, education, engineering, law, whatever, and ask them what's their understanding of profession. And if there is any difference between profession and career, then you will understand the meaning of what I'm saying. Unfortunately, even priests function in the mode of career rather than profession. By the way, profession is also called vocation, and most secular people don't realize that the word vocation has a very interesting origin. It's a word of Latin origin. Vocatio actually is calling, invoke, provoke, provocation. So invocation and vocation. Vocation is a calling. Now, this idea of one's work as a calling goes back to the religious worldview in which one's work is what one is called to do, not by fellow human beings, but by God Himself, a divine calling. That's why priesthood, for example, is considered a calling. It's not even considered a profession. But then that's only in theory. In practice, it is something else. Priests actually live as servants of the particular denominations to which they belong. Like teachers work as though they belong only to the particular school or college to which they are appointed. Teachers with a larger vision that they should also contribute to the larger good of the society is very few and far between. One of the turning points in my life, and perhaps it's appropriate to be a little personal here, if you don't mind, one of the significant turning points in my life came in 1981. I'd already by then taught for about 8 years. And I took my teaching, my calling as a teacher rather seriously. I was sitting in the staff room after giving a lecture. I was all alone. I was in a rather somewhat meditative mood. And I heard a voice speaking within me saying, "India is your classroom." Till then I thought that St. Stephen's College was the be-all and end-all of my life, that there was no world beyond the boundaries of St. Stephen's College. But strangely out of nowhere came this kind of whispering within me saying, not St. Stephen's College, but India is your classroom. My dear friends, let me say this to you, that particular insight transformed my life and it took me to places. I would not have become, for example, a member of the National Integration Council, member of the National Commission for Minority Education Institutions, member of the National Steering Committee for Curriculum Review, member of the Delhi Minorities Commission, the National Executive of the Temple of Understanding, so on and so forth. Various peace movements, quasi-political movements, cultural movements, so on and so forth. My life beyond the walls of St. Stephen's College took a leap forward after that day when I heard something whispering, "Your classroom is India." That larger vision, I believe, is very basic and very important in the understanding of one's profession, which as I have explained, is far beyond the idea of a career. Unfortunately, we have careerists, not true and inspired professionals, and the task of education, I believe, must be to inspire people to think of professions and callings rather than careers. And in this context, I thought I would take up law, the practice of law, as an instance, because unfortunately this profession, which is very scholarly, perhaps the most scholarly profession in the world, has been really oppressed and its soul stifled by the dominance of money. Wherever money becomes the deciding principle, unfortunately, the larger vision suffers. And that has happened to the practice of law. And I believe Christian lawyers can make a difference in this respect. If only they would heed the teachings of Jesus Christ, they will not be the losers, let me assure you this. God's faithfulness is such a mysterious and powerful thing. If only you would trust God with the practice of your vocation, you will be amazingly rewarded in ways that you cannot dream of today. So if only you would accept this mission to redeem the practice of law from its present state of mercenary decline and to restore its lost soul of commitment, to passionate commitment to truth and justice, to the practice of the scholarly profession, I think you would have done a yeoman's service, not just to the Kerala society or Indian society for that matter, would have done a great service by humanity at large. And may that grand vision inspire you in the practice of your vocation. And I send my greetings to the members of this learned profession throughout the country and beyond.